Okay, let's get started with this podcast for Chapter 7. The title of the chapter in the textbook is Quality Improvement and Patient Safety. There's 17 slides in this presentation. Bear in mind that this is the last podcast for Chapter 7. It's the last podcast in a series leading up to the first exam. So once we get past Chapter 7, you will soon be taking your first exam. There are 17 slides here. We're going to cover 7 IRAD questions, so please take notes as we go through it. As you can see, there are 4 learning objectives, and we'll cover each of those as we go through the podcast. Begin with an introduction. Medication safety is an issue and a priority. This is something that's going to come up throughout the curriculum, just not here. This podcast, this chapter serves as an introduction, but we will be covering it much more as we move through the curriculum, not just in this course, but in others. The Institute of Medicine brought the problem to the attention of a large audience in 2000, and they published a report in 2001, and that is going to come up on the first IRAD that you take. In that IOM 2001 report, the IOM suggested in the 2001 report changing the culture of safety and saying it was of paramount importance. And you see that also in the third bullet here. In order to create a culture of safety for the medication use process, it is essential for practitioners to know and understand key terminology like an adverse drug event. So something happens because of the system. An adverse drug reaction is, as you would probably imagine, someone has a reaction to something they take, like an anaphylactic reaction, and a medication error, like getting the wrong dosage of something. There's the theory of human error. When humans work in a system, there's always a risk for error and mistakes. Human error is defined as a failure of a planned actions to achieve their desired ends without the intervention of some foreseeable event. There's slips or attention failures. Got to remain vigilant. There are lapses, forgetting to carry out an action step completely. And mistakes are incorrectly assessing problems on the next proper steps. Continuing with the theory of human error, there are 2 broad strategies for preventing and mitigating errors. First, preventing the initial source of the error, and second, finding and fixing the system problems. Now, this next bullet is incredibly important. It's not going to show up on the IRAD per se, but you should know that systems thinking requires the evaluation of the whole process rather than focusing on just one step or person. Again, going back to that IOM report in 2001, it's just culture. Here is the medication use process. Again, you're going to be talking about this all the way through the curriculum. There's these 5 core steps in the med use process, or the MUP: prescribing, transcribing, dispensing, administration, and monitoring. Now, until recently, pharmacists were considered only doing those first 4 steps. Now, with the incorporation of pharmaceutical care, they're also doing monitoring. But going back to the first step, I want you to focus on that for another IRAD question you're going to have on prescribing. It's during this step of the medication use process that dosage selection errors usually occurs. So when you're prescribing, the physician is prescribing something, they may make a mistake when they call you, the pharmacist, to check on a dosage. You might make a mistake, but a dosage selection error usually occurs in the prescribing step. So know that for an IRAP. There are error-prone drug products. They're look-alike names. You'll get to know these as you get more experience on your belt during your IPPEs and your APPs. You'll get to know what these look-alike names are. They sometimes have similar packaging, especially if two look-alike drugs are made by the same manufacturer. The bottle might look very similar. There are prevention strategies, like an emphasis on dissimilarities, like making tall letters in a name to make it stand out to be different. Unapproved abbreviations list. It's not a good idea to use abbreviations a lot. It leads to errors and physical segregation of similarly worded drugs to make them stand out. Similarly, a lot of folks segregate things like meds for cancer from all the other meds. Root cause analysis, simply called RCA, is a team activity. It's a tool to analyze facts about events and form conclusions about why these events happened. Data collection is paramount. And in this, you're going to see an IRAD question. Basically, I want you to know what kind of activity is root cause analysis, and that being, like right at the top bullet, it's a team activity. Moving on, in comparison or vis-a-vis root cause analysis, there's another type of analysis called FMEA, failure mode effects analysis. Don't get this mixed up with RCA, it's different. Failure mode effects analysis, in it you define the problem, you describe the process, you conduct a hazard analysis, you create an act on a plan, and you sustain and evaluate the strategy. So the question you're going to see, another IRAC question coming up after this, is how does FMEA differ from RCA, root cause analysis? And basically, you need to remember that FMEA is essentially a prediction tool. It's a prediction tool. So unlike RCA, which used to be very common, you used to see all the people in different pharmacies and other kinds of professions. They use root cause analysis, but now they're kind of switching their focus to FMEA because it's better at predicting things happening. So not only pharmacists, but engineers use it, like if they're going to look at a bridge, for example, and there's something about that bridge that they know is a problem, and they have some idea of if they don't do it, there's going to be a hazard and it's going to cause a disaster. So they put together a plan to replace parts of that bridge or do something to maintain it. Same with pharmacy. You have an error that occurs quite often. You do something to define it before it happens. So, for example, like I said, oftentimes in the past, a chemotherapy drug for cancer was given to a patient for a very minor problem. So, in effect, a lot of pharmacies have put their cancer drugs on a separate shelf, just so that doesn't happen. Continuous quality improvement. This is a term that keeps popping up. The healthcare definition of CQI is structured, organizational process for involving people in planning and executing a continuous flow of improvements to provide quality healthcare that meets or exceeds expectation. Now, CQI can apply to a lot of services and products, but for healthcare, that's the definition. We talked about the PDSA cycle. Sometimes it's referred to the PDCA cycle, but it could be plan, do, study, or act, or plan, do, check, act. If you see PDSA, like on one of the IRAT questions, remember that's plan, do, study, act. So in a PDSA, when you're doing continuous quality improvement, you may be studying the product or the service, how it's working, and recommend changes or acting on those changes. It can also refer to as being check, but PDSA and PDCA are the same thing. The PDSA is cyclical model for improvement. So if you see this in a lot of textbooks, there's a cycle of plan with an arrow to do, with an arrow to study, with an arrow to act, all in a cyclical model, a circle. Going on, continuous quality improvement. There are additional methods and tools like flow charts, process flow maps, process maps, lean production system, and Six Sigma. Now, if you're reading in your textbook about Six Sigma and lean production systems, I want you to take away something for one of the IRAC questions, and that is that lean, that term lean you see in lean production system, it focuses on the value of a particular process, the value, how lean it is. It has a different significance or a different meaning than maybe you think, like a meat or something. But lean refers to the value of a particular process. So like, I guess you could, to remember it, mean that like a lean beef product is of high value. Measuring safety. Health professionals are more likely to report data on errors and events if that information is transparent and used to improve practice. There is a use of a variety of data, voluntary error reports, automated trigger tools, direct observation, electronic or manual patient chart review, and data from technology. Now here, maybe not on the slide, but in the textbook that accompanies this slide, the slide illuminates, you need to know what are protocols, checklists, and enhanced communication. And all of those are examples of failure reduction strategies. Moving on to quality measures. Quality measures are used to maintain compliance with various federal and state payment and accreditation programs. Organizations are required to collect and report various quality metrics. Many of these are obtained through specific programs and external benchmarking. So again, we're going to get into this more as the course proceeds, but we have things like HEDIS. HEDIS is quality measures used by hospitals to gauge quality of care provided in that hospital. And those report cards from HEDIS are made available to people online and to healthcare payers to decide if they want to continue business with these hospitals. So it's really important. Patient safety, quality, and regulatory organizations. A patient safety organization, that is a PSO, is a specific designation provided by the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Patient Safety and Quality Improvement Act of 2005 started all this. PSOs collect error reports and provide protection to healthcare professionals who report patient safety issues. So again, going back to these quality measures, if they get a lot of reports from like whistleblowers about something being done badly in a hospital or other healthcare organization, those are collected and made part of that report card. There's different organizations: the National Patient Safety Foundation, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. Again, we talked about this in the previous slide, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, which is actually, I should point out before I go too much further, if you Google AHRQ, you'll see that there's a lot of grants that are given to healthcare providers or healthcare researchers to do research involving healthcare. So if you want to do some kind of a research project involving patient safety, you can get a sizable grant. Institute for Safe Medication Practices, we'll talk about that a lot when you get to your management course next year. There's a Center for Medication Safety Advancement and the National Coordinating Council for Medication Error Reporting and Prevention. Now, the NCCMERP is important to remember because you're going to hear that a lot. This is a council that is made up of representatives of a lot of different organizations, not just one. So this is like getting everybody together around a large table to talk about patient safety. There's the accreditation and the Joint Commission. The accreditation is a method for ensuring an organization achieves and maintains high quality patient care. Although accreditation is officially voluntary, failure to participate will significantly limit financial viability. 3 accreditation bodies: the American Osteopathic Association, the Det Norsk Veritas Healthcare, and the Joint Commission. TJC is the most widely known in the U.S. Now, the Joint Commission, if you've ever worked in a hospital, for example, the Joint Commission comes around regularly and checks on the quality of care in a hospital. So if you're ever in a hospital and the word is out that the Joint Commission is coming, you'll see a very different hospital where everybody is making sure everything is clean, the floors are bluffed, the windows are cleaned. All the charts are made sure that they're all up to date. Everybody puts on clean uniforms. It's like an inspection, and it's like people bring out the white gloves almost to check on everything. If a hospital does not pass the inspection, so to speak, they lose accreditation, and that can have a significant impact on their financial viability. So, for example, if you lose your accreditation, you cannot accept any more like Medicare patients or Medicaid patients. All federal funding ceases. Finally, the conclusion: pharmacists play an essential role in continuous quality improvement. Special consideration should be given to getting involved in the prevention and mitigation of harm associated with medication use. Practice and systemically employ the concepts presented in this chapter. And again, this is something that's not going to end just with this podcast. This is something that we're going to discuss not only with me, but with other professors through the entire curriculum